reiterate our men's breakfast Saturday downtown at 9 a.m. This is going to be downtown. We're going to all be together, men, and we just really want to encourage you to come out to that. Very excited for. We took a long pause on men's ministry at River Valley and focused on some other things, but it's time to bring it back. We're bringing back the bacon. We're getting together, and so very, very excited about that. Next week, we're also having a start party. So if you are new at this church or you've never kind of had some extended time with our team, we would love to get to know you and stay after church next week for a meal and be able to hang out. And quick announcement on technology. So technology can come with great blessings and also bring challenges, right? Last week, the video didn't work, so sorry about that. Would love if you're able to go online and watch that Uganda video. It is so good. It's on our YouTube page or our website. And also with technology, many of you know there are a lot of scammers and hackers at work in this world, and they're really working overtime. There are many hackers that pretend to be me and will ask you for money or gift cards. If you ever give me a gift card, hand it to me in person, okay? Multiple, right? But don't ever give it over the phone or anything like that. If you get an email that feels weird, reach out to one of us, contact the church office. One little trick is you can look at the actual email address itself, and if it says like Tyler346782, probably not me. rivervalleycc.org, that's us. But when in doubt, don't buy gift cards. Reach out to us. And you know, along those lines of scamming and church software, we are changing our church family software from a product called Realm to a product called Church Center. And we really believe this software is going to be the best option for our church family moving forward. And one practical item to address for this is that many of you choose to automatically or recurringly give online, and we're through the Realm software, and we're so thankful if you do that. Thank you so much for supporting us. If you do give through Realm recurringly, automatically, or if you have orphans that you give automatically to, you will need to switch over from Realm to Church Center. I've got a QR code for you to help you. This will get you to start on Church Center if that's what you are wanting to do through orphans or regular giving. And you will need to shut down your Realm giving. You'll have to turn that off. So if you have any questions or needs about that, reach out to one of our team or the church office. We'd love to walk you through that transition from one to the other. As always, we want to just take a moment to thank you for supporting our church and for your generous gifts. I mean, because you guys give, we're able to do this and reach all throughout the world. And so thank you so much, River Valley. We appreciate you so much. Well, today we're in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 17. And so if you're able, would you stand with me in reverence and readiness for God's word? Let each one live his life in the situation the Lord has assigned when God called him. This is what I command in all the churches. Was anyone already circumcised when he was called? He should not undo his circumcision. Was anyone called while uncircumcised? We're going to have fun today. He should not get circumcised. Circumcision doesn't matter, and uncircumcision doesn't matter. Keeping God's commands is what matters. Let each of you remain in the situation in which he was called. Were you called while a slave? Don't let it concern you. But if you can become free, by all means take the opportunity. For he who is called by the Lord as a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who is called as a free man is Christ's slave. You were bought as a price. Do not become slaves of people. Brothers and sisters, each person is to remain with God in the situation in which he was called. This is God's word. Let's pray. Lord God, you've declared that your kingdom is among us. Open our eyes to see it, our ears to hear it, our hearts to hold it, and our hands to serve it. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. If there's a word to describe American culture, or even my own heart, I think it's the word restless. Restless. We are chronically anxious, agitated, unsettled, constantly looking for the next thing. How many of you have heard of the acronym FOMO? Fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Dr. Elizabeth Scott, a psychologist, defines FOMO as the feeling or perception that others are having more fun, living better lives, or experiencing better things than you are. And this is exasperated by social media as we compare our normal, boring lives with the filtered highlights of other people's lives. Dr. Scott defines some related acronyms to FOMO, which I had never heard before, like FOBO, fear of better options. This refers to the fear that you're missing out on potentially better alternatives. I call this the big menu problem. You go to the restaurant with the big menu, it all looks good, and you're worried you're going to make the wrong choice. How about MOMO, the mystery of missing out? This refers to fearing that you're missing out, but you don't have any clue on what you're missing out on. But you just know that you are. MOMO. Then there's FOGI, fear of joining in. That's the fear that if I share something on social media or I tell a joke in a group that I'm not going to get any response. So, what if I post this swimsuit photo and no one likes it, right? Now, the opposite of FOMO is JOMO, the joy of missing out. The positive feelings about missing out or disconnecting from social media. But achieving blessed JOMO is not easy, as we'll see. Digital media seems to shorten our attention span, doesn't it? Decreasing our tolerance for discomfort by providing an easy distraction. Let's say if I'm bored or tired or frustrated or uncomfortable, I can just pull that thing out and scroll. But more than just the smartphone, we have an overabundance of opportunities. We face a literal cognitive impairment called choice overload. It's like when you go to the store and there's 50 different kinds of peanut butter and almond butter, sunflower butter, nutter butters, right? You're like, what do I get? When we look at the bigger life decisions than peanut butter, though, FOMO seems to afflict my millennial generation the most. The word is out on you Gen Z, high school, middle school students, too. We're still figuring you guys out. But for us millennials, we've never had more good options, and yet we're paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice. The what-ifs, the big commitments weigh heavily on us. If I can get a bit vulnerable, I felt this intensely on my wedding day. I really wanted to marry Karina, I didn't have any doubts about her or anything like that. But in the rainy hours leading up to the ceremony, I was terrified and anxious and unsettled at the unknown, at the permanence, the magnitude of the moment, the massive life change. I'd been discipled for 30 years in the gospel of keep your options open, and they were rapidly closing as the day drew forward, which ended up being so good for me. But of course, it's not just millennials. We are a restless people and have been from the very beginning of our country. We're built on migration and movement and mobility. It's almost like discontentment is in our DNA. And this restlessness applies in the church as well. There have never been more teachings, more resources, more opportunities, more opinions, more church traditions on how we can grow spiritually. And yet, by and large, we often don't seem any more spiritually mature. We're always kind of looking for the next big thing. The Corinthians were restless too, only in a little bit of a different way. In the Greco-Roman world, they were restless for honor, social status, avoiding shame. Everything was about climbing the reputational ladder, or by all means, don't fall off of it. You would carefully choose your friends and dinner guests, running background checks on them to make sure they wouldn't kind of bring you down in the eyes of society. And unfortunately, this restlessness had infected their church as well. The Corinthians were obsessed with being spiritual. And they equated spiritual status with social status. How much money you make, how powerful and connected and strong you are in society, that's how spiritual you are. You're a slave? You're a conservative Jewish Christian? You're weak spiritually. You're not as important to God unless you make a change. And as we've seen the last several weeks, this was especially strong in teachings on marriage. That if you're married, it's more spiritual to be celibate. If you're married to an unbeliever, it's more spiritual to divorce them. Singleness, that's the most spiritual, right? Those were kind of the lies that we dealt with in the past weeks. But all this restlessness says, if I were in a different place, I'd be happier. I'd be closer to God. And Paul responds with a radical, countercultural message for ancient Corinth and for modern America. Verse 17, let each one live his life in the situation the Lord assigned when God called him. So what's Paul's message? Stay. Stay. Stay where you are. Stay in your marriage. Stay in your situation. And he basically repeats the command 2 additional times. Verse 20, let each of you remain in the situation in which he was called. And then verse 24, brothers and sisters, each person is to remain with God in the situation in which he or she was called. So your social situation when you become a Christian isn't something to escape. It's something to embrace. It's God's assignment for you to embrace. And then Paul uses 2 illustrations to show the insignificance of social status. Circumcision and slavery. Some of you turned your heads. You woke up when I said circumcision. It's kind of funny. And you might be wondering, why does Paul refer to these 2 illustrations or metaphors? Are circumcision, is slavery a fitting metaphor for marriage? I mean, it could be, but that's not why he's using it. He uses these 2 ideas because they are the great religious and social distinguishers of that day. The big things that divided the world. So verse 18, was anyone already circumcised when he was called? He should not undo his circumcision. So I guess this isn't a hypothetical. This is actually a thing, okay? The circumcision was the great religious marker for Israel, but in a foreign culture in Corinth, the Jewish people stood out. Ancient Greek men would exercise in the nude. So fun fact, that's actually what the word gym means, naked, gymnasium. And so students, tell that to your PE teacher, okay? Actually, don't. My pastor said it. And it's ironic that culturally we seem to be moving back towards going to the gym mostly naked, right? Guys are wearing like tattered dish towels. Girls are in a sports bra and yoga pants so tight it leaves no room for imagination. Right, I'm going to get in trouble here if I keep going. But I bring all this up because Jewish men were often ridiculed in progressive pagan culture for being circumcised. Some even compromised and did a kind of operation to hide it and blend in better at the gym. I won't show you any pictures or diagrams, okay? You're welcome. But and then verse 18b, was anyone called? Well, uncircumcised. He should not get circumcised. Circumcision doesn't matter. Uncircumcision doesn't matter. Keeping God's commands is what matters. So more common than the reversal surgery was the initial surgery if you got converted to Judaism. And it was actually a huge fight in the early church. Does following Jesus mean that the men need to get circumcised? And Paul, over and over in his letters, shouts no, like we see here. We do baptism now instead as Christians. And I'm thankful for that, right? I like baptism better. Men and women get to participate, and it's less painful. It's an easier sell for new converts, even if we forget to turn the heater on, right, Cheyenne? Elsewhere, we do see Paul circumcise Timothy for missional reasons, as to not cause offense to the Jewish people that he was trying to reach out to, but never for salvation reasons. And Paul may have offended the very few Jewish Christians in Corinth by saying circumcision doesn't matter. It won't make you more spiritual. It won't make you closer to God. And then he moves to the illustration of slavery to pretty much make the same point. Slavery in the ancient world was a little different than the American version we're more familiar with. It wasn't about race. It was more about finances. By some estimations, 30 to 40% of Italy, the population, were slaves at this time. So, and then in the bigger cities like Corinth, slaves were generally well-treated, sometimes paid for their services, educated. Some of them were even like doctors and nurses, like highly educated professions. It really is more like employment without an HR department. But your master does have absolute rights over you. You're still owned in a sense, which is not right. But they could sometimes buy their freedom. Verse 21, were you called while a slave? Don't let it concern you. But if you can become free, by all means take the opportunity. For he who is called by the Lord as a slave is the Lord's freedman. Likewise, he who is called as a free man is Christ's slave. So there must have been this thought, this pressure in the church that if for slaves, man, if I wasn't a slave, then I'd be more spiritual. I'd be closer to God. I'd be a more spiritual person if I were free and worked from home, was my own boss. And what Paul says here is incredibly dignifying for the slave. He says, hey, if you can purchase your freedom, awesome, do it, go for it. But if you can't, don't worry about it. Like literally, you do not need this religious anxiety. You are free in the Lord and have ultimate honor already from him and in him. And then he kind of looks at the masters and winks and says, oh, by the way, you're the Lord's slave. Don't forget that. Social status does not change spiritual status. Circumcised or not, it doesn't matter. Slave or free, it doesn't matter. Married or single or it's complicated, it doesn't matter. None of these things changes your relationship with God. We sometimes struggle to believe this, don't we? If only I were married. If only I were married to someone else. If only my spouse could get it together. They're probably thinking the same thing about you. If only I were single, then I'd be closer to God. If only I went to a different church with my favorite celebrity preacher, like Bridgetown or Elevation or Grace Community Church. If only I moved to a red state in the Bible Belt, then I'd be closer with God. Or how about our job, or the primary way we spend our time? There is a false belief that kind of circulates in some Christian circles that being a missionary or a minister like me, that's like varsity Christianity. And yeah, if I could be a pastor like Tyler or Rod, if only I could be in paid ministry, then I'd be closer to God. But can I let you in on a little secret? Sometimes pastors like me feel the opposite. Lots of ministry leaders are quitting. Lots of pastors are quitting. They're going to work regular jobs. And the temptation for me sometimes is that maybe I'd be closer to Jesus if I wasn't a pastor. Now, why is that? Well, there is the pressure of it, but more than this, I think there's this danger, this legitimate danger that my faith is kind of tied to my paycheck. And so you wrestle with that, and the fear is that somehow that makes it a little less authentic, right? Or like when I'm reading my Bible or have an experience with God, there's the pressure to turn that into sermon content. So maybe for me, the grass would be greener as a normal Christian, working at Trader Joe's, right? But without all the pressure to perform up here. What does Paul say? Based on today's text, I don't think any of this is true. Changing your job won't bring you closer to Jesus unless your job is like kicking puppies or something, or doing something evil. I would recommend quitting that job if that's you. So if your job's evil, you can quit that. That would be a great reason to quit and get closer to Jesus. But other than that, it's not going to. There may be good reasons to quit your job or to change jobs, but none of these changes will automatically improve our relationship with God. Retirement won't. Promotion won't. A raise won't. Quitting won't. The image I was getting for the message today is this idea of a small tree. Let's say you go down to Greenleaf or New Hope Nursery and you buy a tree and imagine, and you plant the tree, and imagine if every couple of months you dug the tree up and moved it somewhere else. Somewhere better, more sunlight, better water over here, and I like the view over here, and just every couple months you just keep moving it around. Is that going to be good for the tree? Of course not, right? Why? Yeah, the roots aren't going to develop. They won't go deep. At some point, the better location is a worse location, isn't it? Because uprooting it is bad for it. You got to go all in so that the roots can spread and real maturity can happen. It's kind of like couples who live together before marriage. They are statistically less likely to stay married once they get married. The metaphorical back door is always open if things don't work out. Or there's that study that interviewed 10,000 unhappy married couples. Sounds like a lot of fun. Okay? But they followed up with those unhappy married couples 5 years later, and if they stayed married, 2/3 of the unhappy couples were happy after 5 years. If they stayed married for 5 years. So often in life, we grow by staying. Staying at your job. Staying in that difficult AP class. Staying on the team when you're not getting any playing time. Staying with that difficult person. Ancient church fathers had this peculiar advice for monks. They said, stay in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything you need to know. And then Thomas à Kempis said it more forcefully. Every time you leave your cell, you come back less a person. And does anyone ever say it to their kids when they're getting out of bedtime? Like, hey, stay in your cell, right? But specifically, the advice is for monks and nuns. Solitude. Are we good? But writer Ronald Rolheiser says there's wisdom in this advice for us non-monks in everyday life. And he says this. It's a long quote, but it's gold. Cell is a metaphor, an image, a place inside life, rather than your private bedroom. Your cell refers to your commitments. Stay in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything you need to know. Stay inside your vocation, inside your job, your commitments, inside your obligations, inside your church, inside your family, and they will teach you where life is found and what love means. Every time you leave your cell, you come back less a person. Every time you step outside of your commitments, every time we're unfaithful, every time we walk away from that which we should legitimately be doing, we come back less a person for that betrayal. So stay inside your commitments, be faithful, learn what they're teaching you without constantly looking for life elsewhere and without constantly believing that God is elsewhere. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Stay in God's assignment for your life, and you'll learn what you need to. Reformer Martin Luther said, next to faith, this is the highest art, to be content with the calling in which God has placed you. I have not learned it yet. It's pretty cool when you see spiritual heroes and mentors saying stuff like that. And then writer Andrew Murray, God has brought me here. It's by his will that I am in this place. He will keep me here in his life. He will make the trial a blessing, teaching me the lessons he intends for me to learn and working in me the grace he means to bestow. In his good time, he can bring me out again. How and when he knows. So let me say, I am here. Now, is Paul saying we should always stay? No. He told slaves in verse 21, hey, if you can get free, great, do it. If you can get promoted, awesome. And even in marriage, he said, hey, there's sometimes you just can't stay. Sometimes we hang on too long. That's a different message, right? Paul himself was often and always on the move. So the two questions to ask here, the first one is can I get out of this situation? Because sometimes you can't, right? Like some of the slaves in Corinth, they probably couldn't get out. I write letters to a lady from our church who's in prison. She can't leave, right? You can't change your age, your bodily limitations, certain physical or mental health conditions. We can't change our biological sex, even if we pretend to. We can't change our history, our ancestry, or genetics. I'm 7% East African, if you're interested. True story. You can't really get out of your family for the most part. We're stuck with them, aren't we? You can't permanently offload your middle schooler to Pastor Eric, as much as the Roberts family or Thomas family might want to, right? You can't really quit your maybe you can't really quit your job right now. Maybe it's your only option. You can't change the interest rates. Maybe you can't change where you live. You can't change who's in the White House. Your voting and yard signs and Facebook rants aren't going to move the needle in Oregon. You can't change a season of grief or loss, or we can't bring that loved one back. And so much of our lives is completely out of our control. And so if I can't get out of this situation or season, Paul speaks a word of comfort. No worries. Don't anxiously fight against it. Don't try and get out of it. You can't. But God's got you. It's his assignment for you. And in it, he's even able to bless you. There's really a great peace when we stop thrashing against what is, against reality, and just receive it with God. One pastor put it like this: if you can't get out of it, get into it. If you can't get out of it, get into it. And like Big Sean once said, the grass is green where you water it. John Mark Comer says, we must find God in the contours of our actual lives, not the lives we wish we had, used to have, or plan to have, but the lives we actually have here, now. And then he quotes Dallas Wood, because God is yet to bless anyone except where they actually are. So, can I get out of this situation? But if the answer is yes, can I, then the next question is, should I get out of the situation? Sometimes the answer is a clear biblical no. Should I leave my marriage? Should I never speak with my adult parents? Mostly no, with some exceptions. But most of the time, it's not clear. Should I change jobs? Should we move or buy this house? Should I step down from the role or board or PTO? Should I get married? And if so, when? Should I drop this difficult relationship? I was thinking about this. It's kind of like when God breaks people out of prison in the New Testament. It's kind of, that'd be a fun sermon, like prison breaks in the New Testament. And sometimes, like with Peter, Peter walks right out the night before his execution. It's a pretty cool story. See you, boys, I'm out. Great story. But then Paul has this opportunity to escape prison. I think it's in Philippi in Acts 16 maybe. And the doors bust open and he stays. He doesn't leave. And none of the prisoners leave either. They stay with him. Paul recognized in that moment that there was more value in staying instead of escaping. And there's so many things that happen. He prevents the warden's suicide, leads him and his whole family to the Lord, baptizes them. He gets to shame the local authorities who wrongly imprisoned him. I mean, he's playing 4D chess here. And it's pretty cool. He recognized that there are times to stay in your cell even when you have the opportunity to leave. So I think a few questions, and this is a life group question too this week too. It's like, when should I stay and when should I go? And there's just a few questions I think we should ask ourselves. One, what are the motivations for this change? What are the motivations? Why do I want this? Two, has God released you from this commitment? Have I prayed about it and had a sense of peace? Three, have I talked to wise counsel about this, who are a little bit disconnected from the situation, a little less emotional than I am about this? And does the Bible speak to this? But today's teaching is the reminder that sometimes it's better to stay, to embrace rather than escape, out of love for others and a desire to mature. We often say around here, bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. Not where you want to be, but where you actually are. Last week we were in Bend hanging around an old lava field where you see acres and acres of black lava rock. Not a lot of green. But every so often you see a tree growing right out of that lava rock. Bloom where you're planted. I love that. Lord, make us like that. Paul says in Philippians 4:12, I have learned the secret of being content. He's writing this in prison, by the way. In any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want, I can do all of this through him who gives me strength. Well, verse 24 says this, brothers and sisters, each person is to remain with God in the situation in which he was called. Now, worship team, would you guys come on back up? But our last encouragement here, why can we stay where we are without anxiety? Why can we find contentment in any circumstance? Because wherever we are, we can be with God. With God. You see that the most comforting 3 words in this text? Remain with God. Maybe the most incredible invitation in the entire Bible. Remain with God. Stay with God. Rest with God. Hang out with God. Doesn't matter where you are, if you want to be there or not, you can have God. You can have him with you. That word remain is the same word that Jesus uses in John 15. Remain in me, and I in you. Just as the branch is unable to produce fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Jesus invites us to live life so close with him that it's like we're the same plant, vines and branches. Bring Jesus with you to work, to school, on your commute, into the courtroom, into Fred Meyer, the DMV. Bring him into your marriage or dating challenges or your singleness. Bring him to the gym. Bring him to awkward family gatherings or that contentious work meeting. John Mark Comer says, as you go into your day, go with Jesus. The first goal, literally the driving priority of our day, is not killing it at work. It's not being the perfect parent. It's not getting in better shape. It's practicing the presence of God. So, and he's always with us, right? We just have to practice being aware of his presence. Older Christians called it communion with God. The psalmist puts it like this in Psalm 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. Verse 4, even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. As we prepare our hearts for communion, to commune with, to be with Jesus in a special way, we're going to sing two songs, and both songs come out of a place of deep pain. But both songs also address Jesus with them in that place of pain. Horatio Spofford got the news that every parent fears most. A ship carrying his wife and 4 daughters collided with another ship and sank, and only his wife survived. And so on the next ship to go be with his wife, someone gently told Mr. Spofford when they were over the place where his daughters had perished. And it was there he penned, "It is well with my soul." I'm in deep pain, but God is with me. The second song, Give Me Jesus, originally was titled, And I Heard the Mourner Say. It was popular among African American congregations and may have even originated among slaves as a spiritual hymn. In a place of profound dehumanization and violence and hatred, our black brothers and sisters testified, you can have all this world. Just give me Jesus. Admittedly, these are extreme examples, but I think there's value in looking to the ancestors of our faith, the spiritual heavyweights of the past, and learn that no matter where God has placed us, we can remain with him, we can be with him in the dark times and in the times of delight too. Let me pray for us and we'll sing these songs together. Well, Father, I pray for those of us who are in difficult situations right now. That, Lord, you give us wisdom on when, when to stay, when to go, and if we can't get out of some of these difficult situations, Lord, would you teach us? And more importantly, would we just have a powerful sense of your presence in those places? In Jesus' name, amen.